morning, students. Today we shall understand what is market demand, and we shall also learn how to derive market demand curve with the help of a diagram. When we started understanding demand, we looked into individual demand and market demand. We understood in detail what is individual demand, and we also have derived individual demand curve which was sloping downward. But in reality, in the actual situation, the demand may not be by a single consumer. The individual demand refers to the demand of a single consumer. But in the market for a good, there may be many consumers. Let us take an example. If you go to a market with an intention of buying apple, you may not be the only consumer in the market. There may be many other consumers also to buy it. Therefore, in the market, for a good, there may be many consumers. So it becomes important for us to know how to derive market demand. What is market demand? You know very well. Market demand for a good at a particular price is the total demand of all consumers taken together. Whatever the consumers that are there to buy a particular goods, if we consider the demand of all the consumers, we call that quantity that is being purchased by all the consumers as market demand. To come again, market demand refers to the demand of all the consumers taken together. So technically speaking, you can say that market demand for a good at a particular price is the total demand of all the consumers taken together. We cannot consider 10 or 20 consumers who are there to buy a particular product at a particular price. To make our study simple, to derive the market demand, we are assuming there are only 2 consumers for a good at a particular price. The 2 consumers that we are taking in our example are consumer 1 and consumer 2. Let us understand how to derive market demand curve by considering there are only 2 consumers in the market for a good. At price P1, we are considering the price is P1. At price P1, the demand of consumer 1 is Q-1. We consider that when the price is P1, the demand of consumer 1 is Q-1. Whatever the purchase made by consumer 1 may not be the same that the second consumer purchase. It differs. That is why we are considering the 2 consumers' demand, and we are understanding how to derive the market demand curve. And at the same price P1, the demand of consumer 2 is Q-2. When the consumer 1 demand is Q-1 and the demand of consumer 2 is Q-2, we can derive the market demand just by adding the individual demand of consumer 1 and consumer 2. Just by adding Q-1 plus Q-2, we derive market demand. Market demand can be derived just by adding up the individual demand curve. So how do we derive market demand? Market demand can be derived by adding up the individual demand curves. Here, the individual demand of consumer 1 is Q-1, the individual demand of consumer 2 is Q-2. We just added the 2 consumers' demand here. Q-1 plus Q-2 gives the market demand. Similarly, let us consider another price, that is P2. Now the price is reduced. Let us understand that the price is come down from P1 to P2. At this price P2, the demand of consumer 1 is Q-1 and the demand of consumer 2 is Q-2. Now we can derive the market demand in the same manner just by adding the demand of consumer 1 and consumer 2. We derive the market demand. Here we derive the market demand by adding the demand of consumer 1 as well as the demand of consumer 2 at the price P2. Now we can say that the market demand for a good is derived or can be derived just by adding up the demand of the two consumers at that price. Let us diagrammatically understand the market demand curve. Just by adding the two individual demand curves, we get the market demand curve. You have to look into this diagram, student. This particular diagram represents the demand curve of consumer 1, the demand curve of consumer 1, and the middle one represents the demand curve of consumer 2. By adding the individual demand curve of consumer 1 and consumer 2, we get the market demand curve. We get the market demand curve. You can just see at price P1, the demand of consumer 1 is Q-1. At the same price P1, the demand of consumer 2 is Q-1. By adding Q-1 and Q-2, we derive the market demand, which is the addition, which is the summation of the consumer 1 and consumer 2 individual demand, Q-1 plus Q-2. In the same way, when there is a reduction in the price from P1 to P2, now the individual demand of consumer 2 expands to Q-1 and that of consumer 2 expands to Q-2. By adding the individual demand of consumer 1 and consumer 2, that is Q-1 and Q-2, we get the market demand curve, Q-1 plus Q-2. In this way, horizontally, how we have added this individual demand curve? You can just see we have added the individual demand curves of consumer 1 and consumer 2 horizontally to derive the market demand curve, This method of adding up of two individual demand curves in a horizontal form itself is called horizontal summation. The method of adding up of two individual demand curves is referred as horizontal summation. Elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand is a measure of responsiveness of demand to a change in one of its determinants. While considering elasticity of demand, we consider the change in demand to a change in one of its determinants. It may be the price of the good, income of the consumer, prices of related goods, or taste and preferences. Here we come across price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, and cross elasticity of demand. As far as your syllabus is concerned, we have to look into price elasticity of demand. The demand moves in the opposite direction to a change in the price of a product. Or you can also say that the demand for a good moves in the opposite direction to the change in its price. The impact of price change may not be same at all the time. For some goods, the demand changes in a greater extent for a little change in price. On the other hand, the demand may not get affected by any changes in the price. What I am saying here is the demand is very responsive to a change in the price for some good, and for certain other goods the demand is not at all affected. So how much the demand get affected, that can be measured with this particular concept called as price elasticity of demand. So how can you define price elasticity of demand? You can say that price elasticity of demand is defined as the percentage change in the demand for the good divided by the percentage change in the price of the good. You can also take the theoretical formula like this. Whatever we have understood about price elasticity of demand, we are measuring the percentage change in demand for the good divided by percentage change in price of the good. This is the theoretical formula that you have to mention. You can numerically measure the percentage change in demand for the good to the percentage change in the price of the good. For that, we cannot rely upon this theoretical formula. We have the simplified formula. There are two simplified formula to calculate price elasticity of demand. The first one is price elasticity of demand can be expressed as ED is equal to delta Q by Q into 100 over delta P by P into 100. You can use this formula to calculate price elasticity of demand. In this formula, the symbol delta represents change in the quantity demanded and this Q represents initial quantity demand. Then delta P represents change in the price of a good and P represents initial price. These are the elements that you need to know in the formula. And you have another formula. Any one of this can be utilized to calculate price elasticity of demand. The other formula is ED, that is price elasticity of demand is equal to delta Q by Q into P by delta P. Let us understand how to calculate price elasticity of demand with the help of an example. Let us take this example to calculate price elasticity of demand. First, you need to read the question properly in order to calculate price elasticity of demand. Suppose the price of a good increases from rupees 10 to rupees 12. You have to see carefully. The price of a good is increasing from rupees 10 to rupees 12 and its demand decreases from 10 units to 8 units. As you know very well, the demand for a good moves in the opposite direction of its price. When the price increases from 10 to rupees 12, the demand decreases from 10 units to 8 units. Based on this particular data, we need to calculate price elasticity of demand. As I told you, when we need to calculate, we have to rely upon the simplified formula what I taught you. You can rely upon one of the formulas which we have understood. We are taking this simple formula to calculate price elasticity of demand. You have to come again with the formula, students. ED is equal to delta Q by Q into P by delta P. First, we need to take all the elements that are there in the formula. Then that data is to be put to the formula and let us find what is the price elasticity of demand. Now, delta Q, that is change in Q, can be taken as 10 units to 8 units. The demand is decreasing from 10 units to 8 units. You have to consider the change in demand. From 10 it is been changed to 8. So you have to take that 8, which is the new demand, and that should be subtracted with the initial demand. 8 minus 10 gives you minus 2. Did you understand, student, how to take delta Q? The new demand should be subtracted from the initial demand. 8 minus 10 gives you minus 2. You must be careful, you get minus 2. Likewise, let us take delta P, change in price. The price has been increased from rupees 10 to rupees 12. The new price is rupees 12 and the initial price is rupees 10. When you take the difference, you get plus 2. Likewise, what is the initial price, beginning price? It is rupees 10 and the initial demand is 10 units. That is to be taken. Now, we have got what is delta Q, delta P, P and Q. Delta Q we derived is minus 2. Delta P we got is plus 2. P we got is rupees 10 and Q we got is 10 units. Now this is to be put to the formula. What is delta Q we obtained? Minus 2. That is to be put here. What is Q we obtained? 10. P we got is 10 and delta P we got is plus 2. Let us continue here. 2 into 10 gives you, since there is minus sign, that is to be put minus 20 divided by 10 into 2 is also 20. When you divide this, you get minus 1, which is the elasticity of demand. You get minus sign because there is inverse relationship between the demand for a good and the price of it. Therefore, you always get a minus sign. While considering the elasticity, you must ignore this negative or minus sign, and you have to consider that when the price changes from or increases from rupees 10 to 12, the demand is decreasing from 10 units to 8 units. The percentage change in demand to a given change in its price is 1%. You must say that the elasticity, how much the demand is responding towards a change in price, that can be interpreted with this elasticity concept. So the price elasticity of demand is a measure of responsiveness of demand to a change in the price of the good. Here, to a change in the price from 10 rupee to 12 rupee, the demand is responding at 1%. You must say that the percentage change in the demand for a good to a percentage change in the price of a good is what? 1%. The demand is responding at the rate of 1%. This is the conclusion that you can draw from this particular answer. What we got, ED is equal to minus 1. Students, I believe you all have understood price elasticity of demand. Mainly you will be asked with 2 marks question, what is price elasticity of demand, and also give its formula. For 2 marks question, you must write the formula and also the meaning. You can either write the theoretical formula or the simplified formula, but the meaning should be like this: price elasticity of demand is the percentage change in the demand for the good divided by percentage change in the price of the good. Thank you.